Let's go. All right, let's talk about Web3 developers. And I want to know what the hell is a Web3 developer, first of all. But secondly, and this is the first question for my panelists here, what is the difference between a Web2 developer and a Web3 developer, and is there one?
Testing.
There's really not a difference between Web 2 and Web 3. It's classification of the ability of the engineer or the developer to actually write code and understand the algorithms and the math and science to build code. If you understand that, then you can be a developer in any level. But the challenge is we have a lot of developers in this world that are not really developers.
Well, explain that. That's an interesting point.
Well, you have a lot of guys that write Python code or JavaScript code or whatever, or these informal languages. And yes, you can write reports and you can make all kinds of pretty front-end graphics, things like that. But when you dive into the security, the single sign-on, the depths of contracts and the back ends, you really have to understand what you're doing across multiple levels. The big difference between Web 2 and Web 3, the way I put it is, Web 2 is playing chess, Web 3 is playing 3D chess. Because you're having to deal with so many different interactions within the ecosystem to build that out.
So to answer that question, I think I would focus on what you said at the very beginning, and that is, what in the hell is even Web 3, right? Do we even know what that is? Because it's 1 plus Web 2, right? So, I did some serious research on this, which was asking 2 AIs and 5 minutes of Google, and it basically said, blah, 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 privacy, blah, 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 blockchain, right? It's like, I don't think it knows, Google doesn't know. I'm not sure, honestly, if anyone knows. It made one, I would say, definitional fallacy, which is to try and describe something by what it contains. And so, as a thought experiment, let's describe a car as a metal shed with rubber wheels, right? Or I should say rubber legs. What's the point of the rubber legs? Well, I say it's for privacy. If you're in the car, or I should say if you're outside of the car and you see a car in it, and the rubber legs allow it to shake a little bit, and the windows are fogged, the people inside want privacy. Okay, so I think we need to figure out what Web 3 is, and that will tell us what Web 3 developers are, right? And I think that it's a recognition that the infrastructure that services are running on is not trusted, right? Like, I can go to a VPS server and I can click and I can deploy 50 of my servers all over the world, right? Running on, God knows where and God knows what infrastructure, right? So you can't write a back end that is secure. And secondly, perhaps the people writing that infrastructure, they don't want to know your information, right? A concentration of private user information is a corporate liability because it can get hacked and lost, right? So can we create a system that the people providing the service just don't even tell me? Like, I don't want to know, right? And from the user's perspective, they're saying the same thing. Like, I don't want to give you that information. Like, I just want to make a payment for some digital asset. Why should I give you my username, my password? Like, no passwords, please. Please, no more passwords, right? Like, how many passwords can you remember? Not 400, right? Maybe 2. I don't want to give you all this information. And I want some stake in, I've been posting to Reddit for 10 years. I want some stake in that, right? So I think this is Web 3. And you define it as sort of the goals that a person would look for and not sort of what it contains.
Awesome. Francis. I have to switch it on. There you go.
Hello? No. So Web 2 versus Web 3. So there's a lot to kind of digest from what you're kind of saying there. At the face of it, a Web 2 developer is a Web 3 developer who just hasn't started working with blockchain.
All right.
Like it's as simple as that. Developer is a developer. If you have the skill set to build a product, just using the blockchain for your logic layer is all that is the difference. Essentially, you've got a little bit of extra work in managing keys, but developers these days, they're using encryption keys for signing data all around the place, using HashiCorp or Azure Key Vault. So keys are something that developers in the Web 2 space aren't familiar with. It's just now you're going to be using a key that's stored in a wallet, whether that's on a hardware wallet or MetaMask or anything like that. So Web 2 developers at the crux of it, there's no real difference between them and Web 3. It's just what technology stack you're building on. And the technology stack is quite different. There's a lot of extra to learn. You're going to have the immutability of a blockchain. You can't just ship products and kind of go, we'll fix it in prod. If you ship it onto the blockchain, it's there, it's immutable. If something goes wrong and you haven't tested it, there's real world consequences, particularly if there's real assets at stake. So.
When you're looking at sort of the adoption, or you said every Web 2 developer is just a Web 3 developer, they just don't know it yet, basically, or they just need to start building on blockchain. Are you seeing kind of the adoption that you would expect from developers, and what causes that adoption? Is it because they see prices of crypto going up and they get excited, they want to join in? Is it the tech itself? What do you think actually gets them the most excited to want to make that jump?
So the developers need to know that to be a Web3 developer, you don't need to know all the blockchain cryptography. You don't need to be a blockchain developer. So there's blockchain developers who are going to be the guys who are doing the advanced cryptography, and then there's going to be the Web3 developers who are going to build in the applications on that, whether they're deploying smart contracts or leveraging existing protocols and smart contracts to build their products. So at Polymesh, we're built on the Substrate framework, the same framework as Polkadot. What that allows us to do is a lot of our native primitives are built into the protocol layer. So people integrating with our blockchain don't necessarily need to know how to use a smart contract. They don't know how to deploy it. What they're getting is more akin to a Web 2-like experience, where they're looking at SDKs, APIs for managing the day-to-day interaction. We're focused primarily on real-world assets, so having primitives for identity, asset issuance, corporate actions, things like that, natively on-chain. And these Web 2 developers can become Web 3 developers just by plugging into an SDK, managing the wallets and access to that. So having the key thing is to have a product that is going to engage with people, that people want to use, that a real-world application. And that's what got me kind of interested in what Polymesh is doing, is the real-world application of real-world assets.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that in the main. The issue is that developers, they don't want to deal with issues like taking payments or holding a balance that the user has for security reasons, and because the caliber of the developer has to be so much higher to deal with that stuff. So can that be... So I look for projects that want to offload that to the blockchain, basically.
I think what excites my guys, we have over 100 plus projects done in the Web3 space over the last 8 years.
So most of the projects.
Quite a few.
That's awesome.
And we've actually delivered. We were the original auditors of Cardano. We were the original auditors of Swirls. So we've been doing this for a while. What excites my guys are really cool projects, really cool tech, really cool problem solving that really gets them going. With that, comes the challenges of actually overcoming that and getting it delivered. My founder always said shipping is a feature. You got to get it out the door. You got to get it making revenue, or your client will not survive. So, for our guys at FP Block, they're all about the really engineering and the technology coming at it. They don't buy into all the hype of the crypto and the meme coins and all that stuff. They're like trying to solve real world problems and provide enterprise secure software.
In it for the tech. Huh? In it for the tech.
Absolutely.
The real tech. I love that.
Developers are.
And what do you think that like sort of the world, like the maybe people who are not in Web3 or crypto and are not developers, how do they get started? Like what's the easiest way if they want to get started, or do you think it's a lot more challenging or easier now than it has been?
I think it's easier now. Like with the advent of AI, like anyone can go onto ChatGPT or Cursor or Copilot, put something in there, and if you have an idea, you can get a working smart contract, you can get a working dApp done pretty reasonably quickly. Now, I wouldn't be deploying stuff out into the blockchain without audits, but if it was just you're a dApp developer and you want to have a front end that can interact with a smart contract, the AI assistants that are out there can go off, read the documentation from a website, understand what functions are available, look at code snippets that might be available on GitHub. You can feed it with the context to make it really simple for a non-technical person to deploy a product. Mm-hmm. So AI has really kind of accelerated that adoption, I think, for people.
Go ahead.
So I tell my students that for the first time they're programming in what I call an antagonistic environment. And what that means is other routines are trying to break your code and steal your money, right? So, in all other development, like you can sort of consider that the whole program is working together to achieve a goal, right? So I work on training my students to consider the fact that, someone will deploy another Ethereum contract that will interact with your contract and steal your money. And so I think that's probably what you have to take like a person and start to transition them into Web3 development. They really have to think about antagonistic environments.
I think what we look for in our engineering teams are people that are lifelong learners and people that are very interested in math and science. If you don't understand the math and you don't understand the science, you'll never be a very good developer, period. You have to understand the algorithms. You have to understand what's going on. AI has been a huge boon. Even my guys, we're having to kind of push them a little bit, and now we're getting them to have conversations with Grok and having conversations with the various AI agents, not so much to do their work for them, but engineers by nature are introverts. They don't want to go sit there and talk to their peers because they're afraid that they might be embarrassed about they don't know something. So having conversations with Grok, having conversations with other AI engines will help people move into that space. Also, learn formal languages. Go learn Rust, go learn Go learn Move, go learn Haskell. These are very exact formal languages that provide the things that are needed in this space. And then just use the tools that you're available to you, AI, schools, friends, whatever, and just start doing things.
And they are just that. They are tools. They like the amount of hallucinations that you'll get out of them is still crazy.
Yeah.
So you need to have somebody who at least has that fundamental understanding and background to be able to prompt it with some questions and know when it's bullshitting you, when it's a response.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Which AI agent would you say is leading the way in terms of helping developers?
It depends on what you're doing. I mean, we've built a tool called Fluent, which we're taking in 36 different AI engines and kicking out the answer. So we just get into the loops and let it kind of do its thing. And that's just because it was a project that the guys thought was cool and something they could do. And they did it over a weekend. But the whole point is, these AI agents are changing so fast. So if I said Grok's the best today, something else will be better tomorrow. The next guy will be out today. We're changing at a pace of about one a week.
Wow.
So, it's on a hyper exponential path right now, and we still got a long ways to go. You are absolutely right. You have to know what you're looking at when it comes out, because it could be full of nonsense or it could be very good. We've written smart contracts using Grok. We pretty much write all our content now and all our documentation using AI, which makes our engineers happy because they don't have to write so much because they don't want to do it. And just kind of, it's all there. It's just go play with the tools. Claudio, whatever. And they all do different things. They have all different success rates, and they all are coming out with different engines, every week. So just you got to pay attention.
Absolutely.
So I would jump in there with a proviso, which is you can use these tools, but you have to understand every line that it spits out, right? Like it's about shortcutting. You're thinking, in Python or Haskell, how do I execute that function, right? Oh, I've forgotten exactly how it works, right? Or how do I connect these things together? It's not about offloading your own understanding of how the system works.
And there's been a lot of talk, from the leading AI creators. I'm not going to say any names specifically, but they said there's a future where we won't need developers because everything will be done by AI. And so you all disagree with that?
We're going to need more.
We're not there. Maybe there is a future. We're not even close.
Not even close. In my opinion, we're going to need more engineers than we have now. AI will be a tool that'll let good engineers and developers accelerate what they're doing.
Exactly.
It'll take out the low-end stuff like report building and things like that, some test automation. But we're going to need more engineers out there to deal with the AI engines coming at us. And you're not going to see Star Trek for a long time.
And something like 80%, I think, of software engineering is actually maintenance, right? And right now, if you throw even a small chunk of code at the AI and ask it to make it better, fix a bug, it's awful, right? What they're okay at is building their own code snippet, right? They're really bad at editing yours. So there's going to be a lot, you have to understand what the AI wrote so you can maintain it.
So we still need developers. We're going to need more developers than we ever have. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
More Web3 developers.
More Web3 developers. Yes. Do you think that there's sort of going to be a day or time where we maybe stop referring to these things as Web3 and Web2 and it will kind of just merge? Or do you think it will always sort of stay separate, or as you put it, an addition on top of Web2?
It'll all just blend together. I mean, if you go back, I've been doing technology for now 39 years, so I've been through all the waves since '83. You have your hype trails, you have all the pieces and parts, but it all just kind of blends in. Go back to when we were doing internet, www, HTTPS, all that stuff. Now it's, you hit a button and you just kind of, or talk to it and it goes to where you want it to go. We'll just blend into one thing. We'll have another set of technology come at us in another 3 to 5 years. That'll be, everybody's talking about quantum and all that 5 years down the road. That'll be the next wave hype. We'll just kind of keep moving through them, and this stuff will just become everyday occurrence to us. So, it'll all just, Web 2, Web 3, Web 4, whatever you want to call it, it all just kind of blends together over time. It's just writing good software that delivers value to the customers.
Yeah. And long term, I don't see a benefit in keeping it separate. I think we're stronger together if people see that we're integrated. Having an us and them type attitude of Web 2 versus Web 3, there's already in the past, maybe it's waning a little bit much more now, but there's a stigma associated with crypto and the blockchain space in general. As if we try and have an us and them attitude, it's not serving anyone in the space. So I know we can push Web3 as the advantages that it brings, the immutability, the logic that can be executed on chain to bring that functionality to allow these financial products, these meme coins or whatever to exist. But if we can work so that it's one ecosystem, that we're just talking about the products rather than talking about the technology, I think it will serve us well.
And when you look at sort of there's so many different blockchains right now, there's probably been 5 made while we've been having this panel. Do you see sort of a clear winner, or where the energy is going? Because there's ETH, there's Solana, there's a lot of different developers, or are they doing multiple, or do you see a world with multi-chains, or do you think at some point it's going to sort of aggregate towards one? Will there be a winner in terms of who gets the most developers?
I don't mean to be jumping in off, but so I think there are winners already to an extent, and there are definitely losers, and then there are some that are somewhere in between. Ethereum is a very dominant chain. Here we're at ETH Toronto. But even Ethereum, while they have the market share, the adoption, they realize that from a technology point of view, they can't just stand still. They have been evolving at a very slow rate. Other blockchains have been coming in to fill that void. Vitalik was talking recently about potentially moving away from the EVM to a RISC-V based VM, which is a tremendous change. It's really forward-looking in terms of the ability to put more throughput through Ethereum and having it scale. But it's going to potentially bring more fragmentation into the industry. That you've got your traditional EVM, and then you've got your newer ones. Not all chains are at the same scale as Ethereum, that they have the resources to do these upgrades, to keep up. Like Ethereum Foundation has a massive number of developers in the open source community out there that allows them to do these pretty complex levels of development and innovation at a quick pace. But if you're trying to follow along behind and maintain compatibility, it's going to be much more challenging as a smaller blockchain.
But the smaller blockchains have the advantage of zipping ahead. Like in Nexo, we actually are already have a hardware group that is working on RISC-V, as well as
but there's lots of others, like Polkadot already has Polka VM, so there's lots of people looking at RISC-V. Polkadot, I think Gavin Woods came out and said that he feels that Ethereum is won to an extent, so he's looking to build in additional compatibility for Solidity compiled bytecode that will map to RISC-V based messages. So, and their RPCs being mapped for the Ethereum, and so everyone's looking at EVM still, and seeing how we can leverage that and get ahead of the game and still get the throughput that we have from the blockchains that have been built.
Yeah, I think, you know, from our opinion at FP Block, there will be purpose-driven blockchains, and there'll be multiple of them. You know, you got the Ethereums, you got the Solanas, you got the Nears, you got the Sui, and all the various chains. I think you'll start seeing them become more purpose-driven by chain. So if you're doing DeFi, if you're doing gaming, if you're doing gambling, if you're doing whatever, those chains will become the dominant chain within that, and then they'll all bridge or interface together through, you know, the dApps and through bridging and things of that nature in the future.
So yeah, please go ahead.
I just want to say, I think when there's a wallet that everyone has on this, then somebody's won. But I don't see that in Ethereum. I don't see that in Bitcoin yet. And so there is a space to innovate, and it is to put a wallet on everyone's phone that's used every day, and to basically have your phone act as maybe your avatar and your interaction between other digital services. And I think whoever wins that is going to win.
But you're fighting against wallet providers in that. If you're a blockchain provider and you're trying to get into a wallet, the more prominent wallet providers now are going to say, sure, we'll put you in, but you're going to have to pay through the nose for this. Yeah. Like it's not straightforward to have that mass adoption, because these wallet providers, they're all looking at their opportunity lost, their cost of lost opportunity for saying, okay, I can integrate this blockchain protocol who's going to pay me $1 million to integrate, or I can integrate this one who's not going to pay me anything. So you're fighting against wallet providers who are ultimately deciding which blockchains are going to be successful.
Well, I think somewhat disagree with that. I think at the end of the day, TradeFi is going to drive that. The institutionals are going to come in and drive that. And I think at the end of the day, you know, these blockchain wallets, you're exactly right. What we call it is grandma and grandpa got to be able to use it on their phone. If they can't do it on their phone, mass adoption won't happen, and we're just talking in circles here. Because blockchain in this space has a very specific niche right now, and everybody in it's technical for the most part, and they're playing with multi-wallet and all this stuff. Until we can get mass adoption with the people out on the street to be able to use it just like the internet was 25 years ago, that's where we're headed. Once we do that, like you said, on the phone, wallet integrated, one wallet, across all chains, life will be good. And then we'll be in business.
I know that it's kind of sacrilegious to say this, but when you're talking to institutions, they don't want users holding their own wallets.
No, they don't.
They don't. They're going to use a third-party provider that is doing the key management side of things. it's going to be a more traditional Web 2-like login. You're going to have some OAuth type login to access your keys. That's the way the institutions are going. And from a risk management, they don't want people holding their own keys. You have grandma holding their keys on their phone gets lost or stolen. What have they done with their seed phrase? It's not really there for mainstream adoption. As much as I want it to be, people are not, they're not technologically savvy enough to manage their own keys.
And that's our job, to build that so it becomes that.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to the panelists. This is a really insightful conversation. Great job, guys, and let's go on to the next. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.